They told Thomas Avery to keep digging. His hands were blistered, his back screaming, but no one was listening. Orders came sharp and fast from a man with a clipboard and a voice too clean to ever touch a shovel. A bomb had split open St. Matthias Church 3 hours ago. Now what was left of it had become a shallow graveyard. Piles of soot-stained bodies waited silently while Thomas and the others widened the trench. He'd seen more dead this week than in all of France. He didn't talk much anymore, just nodded, dug, pushed, lifted. He wasn't good for much else, not since Calais. The shovel hit something soft, not wood, flesh. He pulled back. A hand. A child's hand, clutching a torn ribbon. He blinked, paused, then dug around it. Orders were orders. Make space. Clear the area. Bodies to the left. Rubble. To the right. That's what the man with the clipboard had said. Thomas obeyed. Like always. It was easier than thinking. "You," someone barked behind him. "Grab that pickaxe. Ground's harder near the east wall." Thomas stood up. Legs. Stiff, face caked in ash. He didn't say a word, just obeyed. He took the pickaxe and limped toward the wall of the trench. Then the sky cracked. The first blast didn't shake the ground. It ripped it. A roar split open the night. Sirens wailed in distant tones, like some sad choir too late to sing. A second. Explosion landed not far, this one closer, tighter. It struck just behind the church ruins. The air whooshed inward like a gasp before the collapse. Someone screamed, "Take cover!" Thomas turned, but too late. The ground beneath him gave way, fast and hungry, stone, timber, earth. It all fell, and him with it. He didn't remember the fall. When he woke, it was dark. Not the kind of dark that made you squint, the kind that made you feel blind. His body was twisted. One leg was stuck under something. His fingers reached up. Wood. Boards. Coffin planks. He pushed. Nothing moved. He tried to sit. His ribs argued. Silence. Then, something. A voice? No, just breath. His own, rough and loud in the dirt. Then, movement. Not his. Something shifted beside him. "Hello?" His voice cracked. Nothing answered. He listened again. Breathing. Definitely breathing. But not his. He turned. Slowly. Every muscle stiff, thick with pain. Nothing but the smell of decay and the press of soil. A whisper. Clear now. It wasn't in his head, a woman's voice. It came from the other side of the trench wall. Or maybe beneath. He couldn't tell. Thomas. His heart stopped. He knew that voice. He hadn't heard it in years. Marie? He whispered it. Barely. Audible. She'd died in Calais. He'd left her. He was ordered to retreat. She wasn't fast enough. He ran. She screamed. He never turned back. Now, here, in this hole. Her voice. His breath shook. He reached upward again, this time harder. Fingers. Clawed at the boards. His nails splintered. A sharp edge bit into his palm. Blood smeared the wood. He gritted his teeth and pushed. It cracked. A sliver of air. Cold. Dry. He sucked it in like water. Pushed again. The boards shifted. Dirt rained down. He squirmed upward, dragging his body like a man half dead. More voices. Now. Murmuring. Some laughing. One sobbing. He climbed. Fingernails tore. Blood on his lips. Breath in his ears. He reached the edge. His head broke through. Air. Smoke. Light. Then blackness again. Not from the dark, but from the fall. Something pulled him. He didn't fight. He let it take him. When he opened his eyes, he was lying on a cot. Faces above him. One man whispered, "He's alive." Another, wide-eyed, stepped back. That's not possible. Thomas tried to sit. Failed. The man leaned in. "You were dead. Buried. We signed the certificate." Thomas blinked. They handed him a paper. Thomas Avery. Deceased, April 17th, 1941. Today was the 19th. His voice cracked. "How long was I gone?" No one answered. One nurse just stared. "We buried you. In mass grave 14. Thomas closed his eyes. He remembered clawing. The whispers. He remembered Marie. The scream. He remembered the feel of death. And the crawl back. He wasn't supposed to be here. And yet he was. Barely. They moved him to a private room. Not out of kindness. That much was clear. The way the matron looked at him, eyes cold and wide like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing, like he was something unnatural. She avoided touching him when she changed the sheets. He noticed that. Everyone avoided him now. The doctor came that evening. Gray coat, thin glasses, name tag read, Hollis. "I've read the report," Hollis said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "You were found in Mass Grave Trench 14, 2 days after being declared dead. You were buried with 26 others. No sign of oxygen access, no water, no light, no food." Thomas didn't respond. He just stared. "You should be dead," Hollis added softly now. "Even without the head trauma, even without the leg injury, just the burial alone." Thomas interrupted, voice low and hoarse. "I wasn't buried. I fell in. They left me." The doctor looked down at his clipboard, tapping a pencil against the paper. "No one remembers seeing you fall. No one even knew you were missing until we took a head count yesterday." Thomas said nothing. He looked past Hollis, toward the window. Curtain drawn, but no sunlight anyway. Just dim gray behind cloth. "Have you been experiencing any confusion?" Hollis asked. "Memory gaps?" Thomas turned his head slowly. "No." The doctor hesitated. "Hallucinations?" Thomas thought of Marie. Her voice, her whisper, the sound of weeping in the dirt. He swallowed hard. No. Hollis didn't believe him. That much was obvious. But the doctor didn't press. Just stood, adjusted his coat and said, "We'll keep you under observation for 72 hours. Don't try to leave. You've been through something." After he left, the room was quiet. Thomas stared at the ceiling. Blank. White. Too clean. Too bright. His leg ached. They'd wrapped it tightly, said the muscle was torn but the bone was intact. They didn't talk about the deep cut on his shoulder, a jagged, curved slice, like a claw mark. No one knew how it got there. No shrapnel, no beam. Just a wound that looked wrong. The nurse said it was old, but Thomas had never seen it before, not before the trench. He drifted into half-sleep, the kind where thoughts melt into memory, and memory melts into something else. He was in France again, running, gunfire behind him. Marie's voice screaming his name, not in pain, in betrayal. He ran anyway. She tripped. He didn't look back. He just kept running. He woke with sweat in his eyes and the sting of dirt still in his mouth. A voice came from the corner. "You don't belong here." He turned, fast, sharp pain in his leg, no one, but the voice. It wasn't imagined. He sat up, teeth gritted, eyes scanning the room, a knock at the door. Too soft. He didn't answer. It opened anyway. A boy stood there, barely 12. Pale face, messy hair, one eye swollen shut, a bruise down the side of his neck. "You left me," the boy said. Thomas stared, confused. "What?" "You didn't even check," the boy said, voice dull and hollow. "You tossed me in, like the rest." Thomas stood, pain lanced through him. "I didn't." "You did." Then the boy turned and walked out. Thomas limped to the hallway, empty. No trace, no sound, no footsteps. He gripped the wall, breathing hard. Then something caught his eye, a file folder, half tucked under a chair by the door. He picked it up. Patient, records, his own. Inside was a single photo, black and white, grainy, him lying in a pit, surrounded by corpses, eyes open, mouth open, but not screaming, smiling. His chest tightened. A note paper clipped to the photo said, "Preliminary autopsy canceled. Body misidentified." Another note below, "Resurfaced with unexplained scar. Psychological testing pending." He dropped the folder. Behind him, a whisper. Closer now. Marie's voice again. Only one word. Why? Thomas didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Marie, standing at the edge of the trench, dirt clinging to her dress, hands folded like a mourner. But her face wasn't sad. It was blank. Empty. That was worse than grief. At 3 a.m., he sat on the bed, fully dressed, bandage unraveling around his leg, not caring. He had to leave. This place, it wasn't helping him. The walls felt like they were watching. The light bulbs buzzed too loud, the air too still. And the whispers, they were no longer just at night. They followed him into the day. He grabbed his coat, buttoned it with trembling fingers. No one stopped him. The nurse's station was empty. The security guard at the front desk was asleep, chin tucked into his chest like a folded puppet. Thomas stepped outside. The city looked like a half-dead thing. Buildings without windows, streets without sound. Even the air smelled wrong, like dust soaked in blood. He didn't know where he was going, only that his feet took him toward the church. St. Matthias, the last place he remembered before everything went black. The walk took nearly an hour. Every step reminded him of the wound in his leg, now leaking warmth into his boot. But he didn't stop. When he arrived, the church was cordoned off. Tape, boards, a warning sign nailed crooked on a post. Unsafe. No entry. He stepped over it. The ground had shifted. The stone archway was fractured. The roof gone. Inside, moonlight filtered through like faint smoke. The altar was just rubble now. Dust and ash clung to everything. He found the trench easily. It was still there. Grave 14, half covered with a tarp. Boards thrown carelessly across the pit like they'd tried to forget it but couldn't quite manage. Thomas dropped to his knees. At the edge, he stared down. The earth whispered again. Only now, he understood the words. They weren't angry. They weren't pleading. They were waiting. "Come back," one said. Another, "You belong here." He clenched his fists. No. Then a voice behind him, clear, sharp, familiar. "You promised." He turned. Marie. But not like before. Her face was burned, skin blackened around the jaw, hair singed. One arm ended in raw bone. But her eyes, still hers, still green, still full of that hurt. He backed away. "You left me to burn," she said. "I had orders," he gasped. "I couldn't. You ran." Thomas shook his head. "It wasn't like that. We were overrun. You chose yourself." She stepped forward. He stumbled back, boot catching a rock, body hitting the dirt. She knelt beside him, face inches from his. "Do you know how long I screamed for you?" He cried out, pushed her. His hands passed through empty air. Gone. He lay there panting. The pit behind him. A cold draft rose up from it. Not wind. Breath. Voices murmured again. Not Marie this time, others. Men, women, a child. "You didn't count us. You shoveled too fast. You didn't check for pulse." Thomas pressed his hands to his ears. "I didn't know," he screamed. The voices stopped. Silence. He sat up slowly, shaking, covered in dirt and sweat and blood. Then something else emerged. From the trench, not a person, a hand, pale, slender, twitching like a spider. It reached for him, fingers flexing. He scrambled back. But another hand appeared, then another. Soon a dozen fingers clawed up from the earth, scraping against rock and wood. The pit groaned. He heard bones cracking, ribs splitting. And then the whisper again. One voice louder than the rest. "You climbed out, Thomas." A pause. "Now dig your way back in." He turned and ran, didn't care about the pain in his leg, didn't care about the blood. He ran until the church was gone, until the sounds were behind him. He didn't stop until he was in the middle of the road, gasping, alone, shaking. And then, he heard something, not a whisper, a bell, faint, low, ringing from underground. And beneath it, laughter. Thomas didn't remember getting back to the hospital. The night blurred. One moment he was on the road, the next, inside the same white room, sitting on the floor, his back pressed against the bed frame. His coat was torn. His hands scraped raw. His leg had soaked through the bandage and left a trail of dried blood. Across the linoleum, no one came to check on him, not that he expected them to. He hadn't spoken to anyone since leaving. He hadn't dared. He looked at the mirror above the sink. His reflection stared back, and then blinked out of sync. He stood, walked toward it slowly. The face in the mirror. It wasn't wrong exactly, just late. Movements lagged. His own. Eyes twitched while the image stayed still. Then the image smiled, just for a second. When he hadn't, Thomas grabbed the edge of the sink, heart hammering. "You're not real," he whispered. The reflection tilted its head. That he didn't do. He shut his eyes tight. When he opened them again, it was just him. Pale, tired, hollow-eyed. But just him. He didn't look again after that. Later that morning, Dr. Hollis returned. "You left," the doctor said. Not a question. He was holding a file again. His face looked older somehow. He had circles under his eyes now. "Do you remember where you went?" Thomas said nothing. "St. Matthias?" Hollis guessed. "Grave 14? Thomas nodded once. Hollis sat down. "You're not the first," he said quietly. Thomas blinked. "What?" "Since the Blitz started, we've had reports from the churches, the shelters, people who vanished during raids and come back wrong, changed. Some say they saw people they buried. Others talk about voices. One nurse saw her husband, 5 years dead, sitting in her kitchen after an airstrike." Thomas stared. "No one talks about it openly," Hollis continued. "Because it sounds like madness, and perhaps it is. But it's always the same places, the same trenches." He slid a photograph across the table. Grave 14, aerial view. Taken the day after the bombing, only it wasn't just a trench. From above, the path they'd dug curved unnaturally, twisted into a spiral. Not on purpose. Not planned. "We think. The ground's wrong," Hollis said. "Old. Tainted. There were plague pits there once. Medieval. No records left. The bodies were never moved. You didn't just fall into a trench, Thomas." Thomas shook his head. "I heard them." Hollis nodded. "They talk to the ones who've left something behind. Regret, guilt, betrayal. They find it. Dig it up." Thomas looked away. The doctor leaned forward. "What did you leave in Calais?" Thomas clenched his jaw. "She fell behind," he muttered. "I had orders. You left her to die." Thomas didn't answer. Hollis sighed. "They want you because you're already partway theirs. It's not just about surviving, Thomas. They're not done with you." Thomas stood, suddenly agitated. "I'm not going back." "You will," Hollis said, standing too. "Whether you walk in or they drag you. If the dead mark you, you're never really out." Thomas stormed out of the room. He didn't want to hear it. Couldn't. But the words followed him down the hallway. "You're already partway theirs." He made it back to his room. Sat on the edge of the bed. His hands trembled. He pulled up his sleeve. The scar on his shoulder, the strange curved wound, was darker now. Deeper. Like it was spreading, curling along his chest. A whisper in his head said, "You're cracking open." He shoved his fist into the mattress, trying to shut it out. Then a knock. He froze. It wasn't at the door. It was under the bed. A slow, deliberate knock, then another, then 3. Thomas stared down at the floor. More knocks. Steady now. Counting. 4, 5, 6. He stood slowly, heart pounding in his chest. Then he heard a voice from under the bed. High. Childlike. "Is it my turn now?" Thomas backed away, knees shaking. He didn't answer. The bed began to creak. The mattress shifted, and then a face began to rise. From beneath. Pale. Rotting. Eyes gone. It smiled with Thomas's mouth and spoke in Marie's voice. "You can lie. To them, Thomas. But you can't lie to us." Thomas bolted from the room. He didn't look back. Didn't need to. He knew what he saw. Or maybe he didn't. Maybe that was the point. He wasn't sure anymore. Reality had started splitting at the seams, and he couldn't tell what was still real and what was crawling up from that hole beneath him. The hallway outside was empty, cold, still painted in that sterile hospital white that no longer looked clean, only ghostly. He limped fast, dragging the bad leg, gripping the wall to keep upright. Somewhere behind him, the bed creaked again. That slow, groaning sound of something rising that should stay buried. He didn't. Stop. He found the stairwell and took the steps 2 at a time, half falling, half running, He needed to get outside, back into the open, away from walls and ceilings and beds with things beneath them. The front lobby was quiet. Too quiet. No nurses. No guard. The desk was overturned, and the front doors chained shut. He staggered toward them and tugged hard. Nothing. Then he saw something written on the glass. Fingerprints, pressed against the inside. Small, dozens of them, smearing down the glass like children trying to claw their way through. He stumbled back, and that's when he saw the boy again, same one from before, standing by the hallway, face blank, head tilted. Thomas whispered, "Who are you?" The boy stepped forward. "You dragged me in," he said. Thomas shook his head. "I don't remember. You didn't look. You just followed orders." The boy held out his hands, caked in soil, nails cracked and bleeding. His throat was bruised around the edge like a rope had once held it shut. "I wasn't dead yet." Thomas turned away, shaking. "I didn't know. I didn't—" But the boy's voice stayed steady. "You didn't care." And then more footsteps, behind him. Light. Dozens. He turned. They were all there. Faces he didn't know, but somehow recognized. People from the trench, from the mass grave, burnt, mangled, twisted, silent, their eyes fixed on him. He backed into the corner of the lobby, and then they all spoke. Together. One voice. The living walk away. The dead remember. He covered his ears, fell to his knees, and just as suddenly, silence. They were gone. The lobby was empty again, but he was shaking, his breath caught in his chest. Then someone touched his shoulder. He jumped. Dr. Hollis stood above him, face pale but calm. "They're accelerating," Hollis said softly. "It happens faster when you resist." Thomas struggled to breathe. "What are they?" "The ones you buried," Hollis said. "The ones you forgot. The ones the city forgot." He crouched down, voice low. "The Blitz didn't just kill the body. It shattered the ground, loosened things, opened cracks." "They come through?" Hollis nodded. "Only when they're remembered." Thomas frowned. "Then why me? Why not the others who left them there too?" "Because you were the last one they saw," Hollis whispered, "and the first to walk away." Thomas looked down at his shaking hands. Hollis continued, "They think you owe them something. I don't know how to give it. You don't have a choice." The doctor stood. "They'll keep coming until you finish what you started." Thomas looked up. "You mean bury them?" "No," Hollis said. "Face them." He handed Thomas a key. "What's this?" "Back entrance. Gets you out. But not away." Thomas stared. "Why are you helping me?" Hollis's expression darkened. "Because I made the same mistake once. Mine didn't forgive me either." And with that, he turned and walked into the shadows of the hallway, swallowed like smoke. Thomas stood, his hands closing around the cold metal key. The dead were watching, waiting, but he wasn't going to run this time. He turned, walked to the back door, and pushed it open. And the first thing he heard outside was digging, close, slow, deliberate, like someone burying something that didn't want to stay down. Thomas followed the sound. Each step away from the hospital felt like walking into the jaws of something waiting to shut. The city looked half dead. Streets cracked, shadows long, buildings broken open like bones. But the worst part wasn't what he saw. It was what he felt. The weight, like invisible eyes pressing into his back. The digging grew louder, slow, rhythmic, metal on dirt. He followed it through a narrow alley behind a butcher's shop, the windows shattered, the smell of old rot clinging to the brick, until he reached a fenced-off garden behind what used to be a school. There, in the center of a dead yard, was a man with his back turned, shoveling into the dry soil, steady, focused. His coat was gray, his hat tilted. The shovel moved like it had done this 1,000 times before. Thomas stepped closer. The man didn't stop. "Who are you?" Thomas asked. No answer. He stepped even closer. "What are you burying?" The man finally turned. Thomas's stomach dropped. It was himself. The same eyes, same scar down the shoulder, same bandaged leg. The figure grinned, but only on one side of the mouth, like it was remembering how. "Figured you'd catch up," it said. Took you long enough. Thomas backed away. What is this? The figure leaned on the shovel. You've been digging for years, Tom. Just didn't notice. Every time you lied to yourself. Every time you told yourself Calais wasn't your fault. Every time you chose silence. Thomas clenched his fists. I didn't have a choice. There was gunfire, orders. The doppelganger interrupted. You had her. Thomas's throat tightened. She called your name, the figure said. Do you remember that part, or did you bury it? Thomas's voice dropped. I remember. Good. The thing smiled wider. Because they do too. He pointed to the ground. The soil shifted. Something was under there. Squirming. Then a hand burst through. Then another. Small. Delicate. Marie. She was clawing upward, nails broken, face stained with dirt and blood. But she wasn't alone. Children. Men, women, all from the trench. They were crawling out now, silent, eyes fixed on him. You've got unfinished business, his double said. And they've got time. Thomas stumbled back. Marie was out of the ground now, half standing, her spine crooked, one arm dangling like it didn't belong to her body. You left me, she rasped. I'm sorry, Thomas whispered. You still are. He fell to his knees. I can't change what happened, he said. But I didn't forget you. Marie's voice dropped, softer. Did you mourn me? He looked up. Her face was flickering now, back and forth, between the last time he saw her alive and the charred, ruined thing he'd imagined beneath the rubble. He nodded. Every day. For a second, the crowd of dead stopped moving. The doppelganger was watching him, its grin now fading. That's not enough. Thomas looked around. Then tell me what is. Silence. Then Marie stepped closer and whispered, Come back with us. Thomas froze. You don't belong here anymore, she said. Not after what you've seen. Not after what you left behind. The soil trembled. The dead behind her reached upward again, hands open, inviting, not angry. Now, just waiting. Thomas could barely breathe. Then he felt something warm in his hand. The key. The one Hollis gave him. The one meant to get out. He gripped it tight. No, he whispered. Marie paused. I don't belong with them, he said. Not yet. Not until I make it right. Marie's expression shifted. Something unreadable. A flicker of sorrow. Or pity. Or something colder. Then dig, she said softly. And don't stop until you hit the truth. She turned, slowly sinking back into the earth. The others followed, one by one. Thomas was alone again. The fake version of him gave a nod, not mocking, just tired. Then it too crumbled into dust. Thomas stood there, heart thudding, hand clenched, around the key. They'd given him a chance, but they wouldn't give another. He turned and limped away, knowing exactly where he had to go next. Back to the trench, back to where the lie started. Thomas returned to Grave 14 just before dawn, though he couldn't see the sky and didn't need to. Time felt bent now, not moving forward or back, just circling like the spiral they'd unknowingly carved into the ground. The barricades were gone, no tape, no boards, just open dirt, dry and cracked like the earth had been waiting for him to come back. He stood at the edge and stared down. The trench looked deeper now, wider, alive. He stepped in. No hesitation. The wood creaked beneath his weight, half-rotted beams, from collapsed caskets breaking apart under his boots. The mud sucked at his shoes, thick and foul. He moved slowly, listening, not to the wind, not to bombs, but to the soft groans beneath the surface. The dead were listening too. Thomas reached the center. This was where it had happened, where the ground swallowed him, where he woke surrounded by limbs and silence, where he clawed upward through death and memory. He knelt and started digging, not with a shovel, with his hands, flesh against dirt, nails breaking, fingers splitting. He didn't stop. Every handful of soil unearthed something small. A ribbon, a button, a piece of scorched paper with the faintest trace of writing. Marie, see you Sunday. Love you always. He dug deeper. Time slipped. His arms bled. His body screamed, but the pain felt right, like debt being paid, bit by bit. Then his hand hit something solid, not bone, not wood, metal. He scraped it clean. It was a box, small, rusted shut. He pulled it free and sat back, breath shallow. The ice box clicked open on its own. Inside him photographs, dozens, black and white, smudged with dirt and age, all faces, all the ones he'd buried, some familiar, others not, but every one of them staring directly at the lens. At him. He held them like they were made of glass. Then, the whisper came back. Not a scream, not a threat, just words. "Now you see," he whispered back. "Yes." Then another voice. His own, the other him. It came from behind, quiet. "But do you feel it yet?" Thomas turned. The other Thomas stood at the edge of the trench, hands folded, head tilted. No smile this time, just watching. "I do," Thomas said. The double nodded. "You left them because you were afraid," it said. "Afraid of being pulled down with them." "I know. You still are." Thomas stood, dirt falling from his clothes. "But I'm not leaving." His double stepped closer. "Then what will you do?" Thomas held up the box. "Remember." The doppelganger blinked. "That's not enough." "I'll speak their names," Thomas said. "I'll write them. Show the world what we forgot." The figure paused, then slowly smiled. Not cruel, almost sad. That's what they were waiting for. The ground beneath Thomas shifted, but gently this time. As if something old and heavy had finally relaxed. The trench stopped groaning. The dirt became still. The air lightened, if only slightly. Then, from the earth, something rose. Not a ghost, not a monster. Just a single hand, clean, whole, offering something. Thomas stepped forward and took it. Not pulled, not forced. Just held. For a brief moment, he felt something pass through him. Cold and warm at once. Grief, love, pain. A flood of memories that weren't his, but were being handed to him now, to carry. He didn't let go. The hand slowly withdrew into the soil. The other Thomas was gone, and the trench, quiet, finished. Thomas stood in silence, holding the box against his chest. He wasn't alone now, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. Thomas left the trench with dirt in his teeth, blood on his hands, and the box pressed tight to his chest. His legs barely moved, not from pain anymore, that had dulled into something deeper, but from the weight of knowing. Not fear, not guilt. Something else. Responsibility. The street beyond the church ruins hadn't changed, but he had. People passed by without noticing him. A few looked briefly, then looked away, like their eyes couldn't hold on to him for long, like they sensed something and didn't want to understand it. He went back to the hospital, but not through the front. He walked in through the same side door Hollis had shown him, the one that never locked, that never creaked, the one only the dead or the guilty seemed to find. Inside it was quiet again, but not empty. Hollis was waiting at the end of the corridor. His coat was off, sleeves rolled up. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Thomas walked up to him, opened the box and held it out. Hollis peered inside. His face didn't change, but something in his shoulders dropped. "You found them," he said. "They weren't lost," Thomas replied. "Just ignored." Hollis closed the box gently, like it might scream if slammed shut. "I used to think forgetting was kindness," he said. "But it's just the last betrayal." Thomas looked around. "How many of them are still waiting?" Hollis looked tired. "Enough." Thomas nodded once. "Then we don't stop." The two men didn't speak for a while after that, just stood in the dim hallway, surrounded by walls that had held too many ghosts for too long. Later, Thomas was given a room, away from the others, not for safety, for silence. He sat at the desk and began writing, not a confession, not a story. Names, faces, memories. Each one pulled from the box, laid out, written down. He didn't try to dress them up or give them fake endings. He wrote what he knew, and when he didn't know, he left space. Space for others to fill in. At night, the whispers came less often, and when they did, they weren't cruel. Just reminders, A name he'd missed. A face he hadn't described. The child spoke to him again once. The boy with the rope-marked throat. He appeared in the corner of the room just before dawn, when the shadows were longest. "You remembered me," he said. Thomas nodded. "I was 10, the boy continued. My name was David. I had a sister named Ruth. She died before me. I didn't want to leave her. That's why I stayed." Thomas wrote it all down. David watched quietly, then said, "Tell them I was kind, that I didn't cry." "I will." The boy nodded. And faded. That morning, Hollis brought him tea and a stack of old volunteer lists. "Some of these names never made it to the records," he said. "Mass grave burials, most never ID'd." Thomas looked through them slowly. One name hit him hard, Marie Devereaux. No grave, just missing in action, presumed dead. Thomas didn't cry, he just wrote her name down again. Bigger, clearer. It wasn't just about remembering anymore. It was about restoring, giving the dead what they'd been denied. Presence. One by one. The scar on his shoulder had stopped spreading. It would never vanish. But it didn't ache now. It didn't bleed. It had become what it was always meant to be, a reminder of what happens when silence buries the truth deeper than any shovel. On the 7th night, Thomas dreamed of the trench again, only this time, it was empty, clean. At the bottom, Marie stood in her old dress, smiling without sadness. "You brought me back," she said. Thomas stood at the top, heart heavy but calm. "No, I just told the truth." Marie nodded. That was enough. Then she turned and walked into the light, not the kind in stories. No golden glow, no trumpets, just light. Real, simple, peace. Thomas woke up to find a new stack of names waiting. He picked up his pen and started again. 3 weeks later, Thomas stood in front of a crowded room. It wasn't a courtroom or a pulpit, just the basement of an old church, converted into a civil meeting hall. The walls still smelled faintly of damp brick and dust. The chairs were mismatched. The people sitting in them wore the faces of wartime London, tired, lined, skeptical. Some were nurses, a few were local officials. Most were relatives of the missing. Men and women with hollowed eyes who had no graves to visit, no names carved in stone, only silence where memory should have lived. Thomas adjusted the papers in his hand. His fingers still bore the dirt stains. The marks didn't scrub off, not completely, but he didn't try to hide them anymore. "My name is Thomas Avery," he began. "I was declared dead on April 17th, buried in grave 14 at St. Matthias." A murmur moved through the crowd. No one interrupted. They'd heard of him. Everyone had. "I survived. I climbed out. And I brought something with me." He raised the notebook. Inside were names. Over 300 now. Some from old hospital records. Others from whispered confessions passed along by night nurses and shell-shocked gravediggers. Still more came in dreams, voices he recognized, stories he didn't yet understand. "I came here today not to explain what happened. I don't have the language for that. But I came to remember, to remind you. These people," he opened the book, turned it toward them, "existed. They didn't vanish. We buried them, but we didn't see them. We didn't know them." One man near the front raised a hand, thin, shaking. "My brother disappeared during the Brixton raid. They said there was nothing left to identify. Could he be in your book?" Thomas stepped down from the podium, handed the man the notebook. The man flipped through slowly, carefully, then stopped. He pressed his hand to his mouth and nodded. Another woman stood. "My daughter, she was at the factory. They never sent me anything back, not even her coat." Thomas walked over. "What was her name?" "Lucy," she said, voice cracking. "Lucy Howard, 18. He turned to the next page and wrote it down in thick, deliberate ink. Every name he heard, he wrote. Every face described, he sketched. This wasn't just a speech. It was a reckoning. Later that night, he sat alone in the basement. Everyone else had gone home. Candles flickered in a circle around the notebook, casting small, restless shadows. Then, the air changed. Not colder, just quieter. From behind him came a soft voice. Feminine. Strong. Thank you. He didn't turn. He knew it was Marie. She wasn't there to haunt anymore. She was watching. And for the first time, approving. He whispered, "I'll keep going." "You don't have to," she replied. He looked up. "Yes, I do." And she said nothing more. Only left him with the warmth of that one final truth. She heard him. That night, Thomas slept without dreaming. But when he woke, another name was already on the tip of his tongue. One he'd never heard before. But knew he needed to write. He opened the notebook and kept going. By the fourth week, Thomas had become something else to the people of London. Not a ghost, not a survivor, but something in between. A witness, a messenger. The man who crawled out of the grave and came back not just with breath, but truth. The ministry sent for him. 2 men in dark suits. No smiles. No names. They met him in a small office behind a half-collapsed post office on Northumberland Road. The walls were bare. The table metal. A single folder lay between them. "We've reviewed your claims," one said flatly. "This business with the trench, the voices." Thomas said nothing, just watched him. "We believe you may be suffering from unresolved trauma, combat stress, hallucinations, perhaps induced by oxygen deprivation." Still, Thomas didn't answer. The second man leaned forward. Younger, less practiced at hiding the curiosity behind his eyes. "You were found in a mass grave, declared legally dead, and then reappeared, alive, with detailed knowledge of the identities of dozens of unrecorded casualties." He tapped the file. "That alone demands explanation." Thomas finally spoke. "And yet you're here, not to help, but to contain." A pause. The older man frowned. "Let me be clear, Mr. Avery. This," he motioned to the notebook Thomas carried, "is dangerous. These names, these claims, they reopen wounds. People are already frightened. They don't need ghosts walking through their grief." "They are the ghosts," Thomas replied calmly. "I'm just giving them their names back." "You'll stop this," the older man snapped. "Immediately. No more meetings, no more public lists. You'll surrender the notebook, or we'll make sure you disappear for real this time." Thomas stared at him, eyes cold. "You already buried me once." He stood up, turned, and walked. Out before either of them could stop him. Back on the street, the sky seemed darker than usual, not from clouds, not from weather, but from something deeper, like London itself was holding its breath. He went straight to St. Matthias again. The trench was still there, still dead, still silent. But when he stood at its edge now, it didn't threaten. It waited. He sat at the rim and opened the notebook, and he read every name, one by one, loudly, clearly, like he was calling roll for a classroom that had long since fallen silent. No crowd around him this time, no curious onlookers, just him and the trench. When he reached the name Lucy Howard, the ground gave a soft tremor, not a quake, just a shift, like something had finally turned over and rested. He kept going. David Wexley, Susan Bell, Matthew Crane, Jonathan Doyle, Marie Devereaux. His voice cracked on that one, but he said it anyway, and the silence after it was different. Not empty. Full. That night, a letter arrived at the hospital. No return address, just a wax seal, a black mark pressed into the flap. Inside, a single sentence: "You're disturbing the balance." Thomas read it once, burned it in the sink. The flames curled around the paper fast, like it wanted to vanish. He stared into the fire until it died out. The next morning, he found the hospital room had changed. The walls were peeling, the window was gone, and the bed, missing. In its place, a dirt floor, and the faint outline of a coffin. He wasn't dreaming. They were warning him. But it didn't matter anymore. They could pull him back. They could drag him under, but he would keep speaking. He took out the notebook and began writing more names. Names no one had given him yet. Names that came in fragments, sounds, blurs of images and war. They were waiting to be remembered. And he was ready. Thomas didn't leave the hospital for the next 2 days. Not out of fear, but purpose. Something had shifted since the letter, since the floor changed, since the walls peeled like skin. He wasn't just haunted anymore, he was being watched. Not by the dead, by those who wanted them silent. On the third night he found the notebook missing. His hands shook as he turned the room inside out. Pillow, mattress, floorboard. Nothing. Gone. But he didn't panic. He knew who took it. He waited until midnight, then made his way down the corridor, past the sleeping nurses and into the old East Wing, a part of the hospital long since shuttered. The door was, chained, but the lock had rotted away. He stepped inside. The hallway smelled like ash and rust. Lights flickered, not electrically, but like the shadows themselves were breathing. At the end of the corridor was a room, room 12B. He pushed it open. Inside were both men from the ministry. The older one stood near the window, smoking, while the younger sat at a desk, Thomas's notebook open in front of him, gloved hands flipping through the pages like they were handling cursed scripture. "You shouldn't be here," the younger man said without looking up. Thomas closed the door behind him. "I want it back." The older man turned, exhaling smoke. "This book is not your property. These names are not yours to erase," Thomas said. "They're not being erased. They're being protected," the older one growled. "You think memory is harmless? These people died in chaos, in horror. They deserve peace, not resurrection through panic and ghost stories." "They're already awake," Thomas replied. "You can't put them back to sleep. They were quiet before. You climbed out of that hole." "No," Thomas said, stepping forward, voice low. "They were forgotten. There's a difference." The younger one finally looked up. His eyes weren't hard like the others, just afraid. "Do you know what you're playing with?" he asked. "You're not just stirring up grief. You're opening doors. Doors meant to stay shut." Thomas reached for the notebook. The older man stepped in front of it. "You're done, Mr. Avery." Thomas didn't move. He stared straight into the man's eyes. "You think this ends with a confiscated notebook?" The man said nothing. Thomas's voice dropped. "They're not trapped in those pages. They're in the walls, the floors, the trenches. You think removing ink will stop them?" The older man held his gaze. For a second, just one, something flickered behind his eyes. Fear. The light in the room dimmed. The air went thick. The window cracked, slowly, deliberately, spider veins crawling across the glass. And then, a voice, from inside the notebook. Let him speak. The pages fluttered, not from wind, from breath. The younger man shoved the book away like it burned him. The older one took a step back, visibly rattled. Thomas picked up the notebook. It was warm, like it had pulse. As he turned to leave, the younger man whispered, "They'll come for you." Thomas paused at the door. "They already have," he said. He walked out of the room, down the hallway, and into the cold, early light of morning. But this time, the whispers followed not in dread, but in rhythm, not voices pleading, chanting, repeating one phrase, "He remembers us. He remembers us." He returned to his room, shut the door, and opened to a fresh page. The ink from his pen flowed easier than it ever had. New names surfaced, one after another, like they'd been waiting their turn, like the dead were lining up now, not to haunt, but to be heard. And Thomas understood the truth. The dead didn't want revenge. They wanted witnesses. Thomas kept writing. The notebook, once just paper and ink, now pulsed with something deeper. Memory, maybe, or grief given form. Each name he wrote made the room colder, but also clearer. It was no longer a place of torment. It had become a confessional. The dead weren't vengeful now. They were waiting, patient, organized, methodical. As if once the first was heard, the rest remembered they had the right to speak too. By the 7th page that night, the names came so fast he couldn't keep up. His hand cramped, fingers stained black. He barely paused to breathe. Then, one last name rose to the top of his mind like a breath from below. Thomas Avery. He stared at it for a long time, then wrote it down. As the pen touched the paper, the lights in the room flickered one final time. The floor shifted beneath him. Not violently, just firmly, like the trench had reached across the city and placed its palm beneath him once again. But this time, it wasn't pulling him down. It was lifting him, accepting him. The wall behind him cracked slightly, not from pressure, but from release. Something had been unburdened. Thomas looked around the room, at the dirt beneath the floorboards, the ash beneath the walls, the silence behind the sirens. The city had always carried its dead. It just forgot to listen to them. Until now. He stood, up, breath steady. The notebook lay closed on the desk, no longer glowing, no longer trembling, just waiting for the next hand to open it, and there would be another hand. Because this wasn't just Thomas's burden anymore. It belonged to all of us. If you've made it this far, you've walked through the dark and clawed into the light. And now it's your turn to speak. Drop a genius word in the comments below. Any word that captures what this story made you feel. Something only you could say. Was it redemption? Was it reckoning? Was it remembered? And if this story buried itself under your skin, subscribe for more tales where the forgotten rise and the silence breaks. Because in this place, the dead don't. Stay quiet, and neither should you. He climbed out. Now it's your move.